Welcome to episode 70 of the 3am Fear podcast. This is the second vampire case that we are covering on this podcast. If you haven't listened to the first one, then check out episode 69 where we talk about the Atlas vampire. Today, we'll be talking about a case that took place in the early 1990s. A beautiful and romantic city of Paris was also home to a much darker reality. Nico Clos, a self-proclaimed satanic necrophile, haunted the city's cemeteries and hospital morgues, digging up corpses to mutilate and eventually turning to living victims to satisfy his gruesome desires. His story begins with him haunting the dead and would end up targeting the living. Known as the Vampire of Paris, Nico's activities came to head on November 15, 1994. Crime scene investigators arrived at his rundown apartment in Paris's red light district near the famous Moulin Rouge. Nico, a 22-year-old mortician, had been under investigation for a series of homophobic shootings. He had been arrested earlier that day after a 5-week manhunt following his attempts to buy a video recorder using a stolen credit card and forged ID belonging to Thierry Bissonnier, a man who had been shot dead in his very own apartment just hours earlier. Inside Nico's apartment, investigators would uncover a horrifying scene. Human leg bones and vertebrae hung from the ceiling. Human teeth and bone fragments were scattered everywhere, and his shelves were filled with hundreds of slasher and hardcore S&M videotapes. They found an urn covered in dry blood that sat by the phone, and a bullet-riddled Bible was nailed to one wall, while posters of violent images covered the other. The police also found a backpack containing handcuffs, surgical instruments, and duct tape. All of this was found under Nico's bed. Along with this, they also found a .22 caliber handgun, which was sent for ballistic testings. And the most chilling find of all was that inside his refrigerator, they found bags of human blood. During his first police interview, Nico would go on to say that he had no idea who this man was. However, when he was confronted with the positive test results of the ballistic testing that was done, he said he did shoot him, but after meeting him on Minitel, an early precursor to the internet. The murder was eerily similar to other recent shootings in the city. All involved gay men who were shot in their apartments soon after they had connected with someone on Minitel. No matter how much the police would ask, Nico would always go on to say that he had no idea about these men. Instead, he provided a full and graphic confession to the murder that he committed. He explained the blood bags and human remains found in his apartment in detail, and this shocking confession would give him the title of the Vampire of Paris. Hello and welcome to the 3am Fear podcast. I'm Nikita Ferrao, mystery and thriller author. On this podcast, I talk about real crimes and real people. Due to the graphic nature of some of this content, listener discretion is advised. You can find the episode show notes on my website 3amfear.com. Let's get started. Nico was born on March 22, 1972 in Cameroon, Africa, to French parents. His father was a computer technician whose job required the family to relocate frequently. By the time he was 6, he had lived in Africa, England, Switzerland, and France. Despite being well provided for, Nico's mother was emotionally distant, and his father was always away. And because of this, Nico did not receive the love that he wanted as a child. He also didn't have a lot of friends. He became cold and withdrawn and always stayed by himself. When Nico was just 10 years old, something life-changing happened. His grandfather died as a result of cerebral embolism. Now the death had a huge impact on him because Nico's family always blamed him. He had just had a fight with his grandfather before he died, and Nico's family believed that it was Nico who put so much stress on his grandfather that he died. This incident was the first time Nico came close to death. Surprisingly, Nico's fascination for death did not begin from grief, but he was captivated. The funeral home, the casket, the people who worked there, it was all very fascinating to him. Following his grandfather's death, Nico's mother would go on to have nightmares. She would wake up in the middle of the night screaming, saying that her son was trying to kill her. She accused him of having supernatural powers, which would eventually lead to her being hospitalized. But even there, the fear would not leave her. She would always say that one day her son would kill her. Nico got himself into reading about death, the afterlife, and the occult. He became fascinated with vampires, werewolves, black magic, and the Sumerian god Pazuzu, later immortalized in the film The Exorcist. His father was an amateur anthropologist. He would share stories about voodoo rituals, the witch doctors, and from whatever travel experiences he had. He had no idea that whatever he was telling Nico was actually feeding into his desire to know more about this other life. By the age of 11, Nico had come across a magazine containing graphic images of a woman who was murdered by the Japanese cannibal Issei Segawa. That is a whole other story in itself. If you want me to cover, I will. These images had a profound impact on him. According to satanic teachings that he had studied, consuming human flesh allowed one to absorb their power, and Nico believed that if he ate human flesh, then he would have more power. And that is what he started thinking about and fantasizing about every single day. In high school, Nico's obsession with death and violence intensified, and he began to entertain thoughts of murder. His family was living in Portugal, and he had attended school for French expatriates. However, most of the students were wealthy, and so they didn't quite fit into Nico's world. And so once again, Nico was left all alone. When Nico looked at these people, he looked at them as potential threats. He knew that his classmates talked about him in Portuguese. He just couldn't understand what they were talking, but whatever it was, he didn't believe that it was good. And this led to him having violent fantasies between the ages of 12 to 15. He would imagine going to school with a knife and stabbing his classmates one by one. And the thoughts became more and more obsessive. Nico's parents noticed all of these, but they never thought that he would do something. That is, until one day when he decided to walk into school with a knife and threaten to kill another student. Before the family could find him a psychologist, they had to move again. By 16, Nico was in Paris. He would spend most of his time in Paris's cemeteries, finding peace among crypts and tombs. Between the ages of 16 and 21, he even skipped school just to spend some time in the cemetery. He wanted more from life, and he began to study lockpicking so that he can go and access the coffins and bodies. When he was in prison in 1999, he wrote about his attraction to corpses. This is a small snippet from his statement. Quote, "I woke up one day feeling this sinister urge to dig up a corpse and mutilate it. I gathered a small crowbar, a pair of pliers, a screwdriver, black candles, and a pair of surgical gloves in a backpack. Then I took the subway until Trocadero station. It was nearly noon. The gates of the Passy cemetery were wide open, but nobody was inside. The undertakers were out for lunch. Passy is a small Gothic graveyard with plenty of huge mausoleums which were built during the 19th century. It is located right between two large avenues, so it's impossible to climb inside at night. But anyway, nobody could ever imagine that there was someone robbing graves at noon. I had this special grave in mind. It was a small mausoleum, the burial site of a family of Russian immigrants from the 1917 revolution. I had already pried open the iron door a few days before, and I had closed it afterwards, so it would seem that no one had ever touched it. All I had to do was kick it open. At this point, my mind was in total chaos. I had flashes of death in my head. I took a deep breath and I climbed down the steps leading to the crypt. End quote. His description would go on and on about what he did inside. Now, I can't read out every single thing because it's too big and it's going to get graphic, so I'll link it in the description. You can read it from there, but this was actually very disturbing. After breaking into his first grave, Nico spent nights in the crypts, forming satanic rituals or meditating. He started collecting souvenirs, storing them first in his parents' house and later in his apartment. He had skulls and human remains in several bags, which he occasionally took out to hold or place on a makeshift altar. At 18 years old, Nico began to go to goth clubs and death metal gigs. But even there, he didn't feel like he belonged to that place. He was not gothic, he was more towards the darker side. He would go on to say that he saw people in the street or on the subway as ghosts and not real people. In 1992, at the age of 20, Nico joined the military briefly, working as a gunsmith and stealing several weapons. The following year, he studied psychology at university, where a tall tower reminded him of the mass shootings by Charles Whitman from the University Clock Tower in 1966. Nico was now motivated to do something similar. He wanted to take people's soul by drinking their blood and ultimately killing them. In 1993, Nico began working at the Saint Vincent de Paul Hospital in Paris, a hospital for children. That was the place where his life changed. He was in close contact with corpses. His job was to be a morgue attendant. This is what he said, quote, "I assisted the autopsy of a 10-year-old girl. The other attendant showed me how to stitch up her belly, and that was the first time I ever got to touch a fresh corpse. I was amazed by how red and clean her organs were." End quote. Nico would then go on to say that there were multiple times when he would be left alone with the body after the autopsy so he could stitch them back up. And that is when he started taking out small strips of muscles from the body. He would eat them raw or sometimes even take them home and cook them. He believed that cannibalism was a communion with the devil, specializing his actions. At one point in time, Nico would confess to having sex with corpses, although later he would go on to say that this was not true. At the hospital, he also delivered blood bags and found a way to take unused ones home. He drank the blood on his own or mixed it with human ashes or protein powder, enjoying the taste and the rush that it gave him. Now, there was one downside to his entire job: his 3 new colleagues. They were a tight-knit group and they always worked together, and Nico felt like an outsider once again. What was even worse was that according to Nico, they did not appreciate their job. They just saw it as, you come to work, you do the work, and you go back. But for Nico, his job was everything. He loved corpses. He loved being there. His whole life, he had never felt that close as much as he did now. And he was not happy that his colleagues didn't feel the same way. And that is when he believed that humanity needed predators, and he was one of them. When one colleague invited Nico to his place for a drink, Nico brought with him a penknife, but he didn't go with it. He planned to try it again, and this time he wanted to kill all 3 co-workers. That was his plan. But first, he wanted to practice with the new gun he bought. On October 4th, 1994, Nico went looking for a victim. It is said that his girlfriend was a dominatrix, but I'm not completely sure about this, so I'm just going to say that it is believed it's like that, but I'm not sure about it. Now, this is where Nico met 34-year-old Thierry Bissonnier, a Paris restaurateur and part-time musician. Thierry was in a stable relationship, but occasionally would engage in anonymous sex with strangers. He was interested in bondage and S&M. Nico met Thierry online and then got himself invited to a meeting at Thierry's apartment. When Nico arrived, he quickly turned, pulled out his gun as Thierry closed the door. After a few moments, Nico shot Thierry in the eye. He fell, but he was still alive, making horrible noises. Nico reloaded and shot the gun again several more times, but Thierry still clung to life. Nico would then go on to wander around the apartment, found some cookies to eat, and watched as Thierry bled to death. He shot him one last time and crushed his head with a plant container. Nico wiped down his fingerprints, took Thierry's checkbook, credit card, wallet, ID papers, an alarm clock, and an answering machine and left the scene. Now, to be honest, Thierry was cheating on his partner, so there was literally nothing that connected Nico to Thierry, and so there was no way that Nico could have been caught. But he made a stupid mistake. That is, he tried to forge one of Thierry's bank checks to buy a VCR, and when identification was asked, he tried to give Thierry's ID card with Nico's photo on it, but unfortunately it didn't work. And that is when Nico got caught. Nico would say, quote, "On November 15, 1994, I was arrested in front of Moulin Rouge Cabaret following an altercation with a woman. The police had recognized me from the photograph on Bissonnier's forged driving license. And while under custody, I confessed to the murder when I was shown the ballistic evidence. Further investigation showed I had been robbing the graves of several Parisian Gothic graveyards, stealing the bones and mutilated the mummified remains. When asked the reason why I was storing stolen blood bags inside my refrigerator, I simply answered that I drank it on a regular basis. I also confessed to being on a very special diet and went on to describe my mortuary job and cannibalism." End quote. During the police interviews, Nico first claimed Thierry's murder was a robbery gone wrong, then said it was revenge on a random gay man, but nothing matched the evidence that were found: bags of fresh blood and human remains. Finally, Nico confessed that he was a satanic necrophile and that he wanted this because he was into desecration and cannibalism. Nico understood that he would be considered a monster for life. Despite his 2 years in custody, he underwent psychological tests and claimed corpses in the mortuary urged him to kill, hoping for a reduced sentence. He was diagnosed as psychotic with tendencies for necrophilia and sexual sadism, but was deemed fit to stand trial. In May of 1997, Nico was convicted for premeditated murder and armed robbery, along with fraudulent use of bank check, falsification of a driver's license, and attempted fraud. He was not charged with grave desecration, cannibalism, or stealing blood, which he believed was to avoid a reduced sentence due to insanity. Nico was sentenced to 12 years in prison but served only 8, and he was released in March 2002. Nico would go on to say that he was locked up with serial killers and terrorists. During his stay there, he shared a block with at least 6 serial killers. After his release, Nico corresponded with around 30 different killers and serial killers, finding them boring. He would say that the most exciting one was Issei Segua because he was a cannibal. While Nico was in prison, he began painting serial killer-inspired art. After he got out, he started doing it as a profession. He was known as the Vampire of Paris, and when he got out, he got so much fame. But as fast as it came, this novelty started to wear off. And that's when he realized people were not looking at him with pride or even as a celebrity. People were looking at him as a freak. He was hoping that he would get accepted into the goth community, but even there was no place for him. Nico had killed someone. Any community that he got into, that community got a bad name. He felt rejected and humiliated. He was thrown out of any and all jobs that he applied for. He would get fired repeatedly, and no one wanted to be associated with him. In an effort to reinvent himself once more, Nico embraced his true identity as a reformed Satanist and former killer. He claimed that he would never kill again, not because of any moral reasons, but because he found that his art was more exciting to him than killing someone. Nico would go on to write several works, including a piece called The Cannibal's Cookbook, an autobiography titled The Gospel of Blood, and another book that is supposed to be about Richard Ramirez, the famous Night Stalker, and the woman who was with him. Over the years, Nico gave many interviews, and every time there was something different about the way he spoke. It was very difficult to understand whether he actually did them or was he just exaggerating. Sometimes it just felt like he was trying to overachieve or to show that he had done this and he was very proud of himself. Now, whether he would ever cross this boundary that he kept for himself is unknown. When Nico was contacted by people who wanted to kill someone just like him, his advice to them was very simple. He said, quote, "It's a simple choice, and I think it's the most effective argument why not to act on those urges. Because when you understand that you're going to feel alive for several hours, but what then? You will eventually get arrested, go to prison, and maybe spend the rest of your life there. Is it really worth it? Creativity is far more satisfying. That is what I try to make people understand. We have those dark urges, but just the fact of not being the person they want you to be is satisfying. This is one of my biggest highs now. People expect me to revert to my old ways and continue committing those acts, or believe that one day they will discover a mass grave somewhere. But no, I want to disappoint people in that way. I don't want to be a part of this narrative. What I appreciate the most is that those who think they can predict me can't." End quote. With this, we end the story of Nico Claw. A big thank you to all my fellow listeners who have been listening and supporting this episode. Your reviews, your listens mean a lot. If you love this episode, if you love the stories that I put out, then please do leave a rating on whichever podcasting platform you're listening from. It would really mean the world to me. Other than this, I also have a YouTube and an Instagram page. I'll link it in the description. Do check it out. I have different stories on Instagram, and I'm planning to put out some short horror stories on YouTube. So do subscribe to my YouTube channel and stay tuned. I am also an author, love fiction stories. If you want to check out my free fiction book, I'll link it in the description. I'll also link my other account in the description where I talk about fiction writing, travel, and I also will soon start sharing fiction stories. So stay tuned. So do follow me there. Thank you so much for everything. That's all for this week. Stay kind, stay safe, and see you next week.